This week, very special episode. First up, we welcome Vaughn Adams. He's an enterprise sales engineer at LogRhythm. He's going to talk about detecting attacker behavior. I combined those two words. Did you notice that? Detecting attacker behavior with firewall logs and SystemOn. In the next segment, we're going to have a roundtable discussion. Many of us are here in studio and remotely. We're going to talk about the topic of what the heck does it mean to be security basics? What are security basics? What does that mean? In the final segment, it's a pre-recorded interview with Mandy Logan, hacking the brainstem, as she talks about her journey through recovery and her love of InfoSec. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Domain Tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools.
And welcome to the epic show. And April's laughing already. She's not going to be holding it together. But first, let me introduce you to a host who only likes the tip, Mr. Paul Asadori.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 587. We're recording on December 20th, 2018. This is, in fact, our last show for the year. Of course, we'll be back in January with all of our shows next year. No programming changes. It's going to be exciting. We are in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Now, normally I would introduce all of our hosts. However, there's like a lot of them right now. So what I'm going to do so we can get to the technical segment is just say that Matt Alderman, Larry Pesci, Doug White, Jeff Mann, Jack Daniel, not Jason Wood, Jason Albuquerque, Keith Hoodlet, Joff Thayer, Patrick Lafferty, Lee Neely, April Wright, and Brent Dukes are here with us in studio.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Yes, and all of that too. So a couple of quick announcements before we get started. The RSA Conference 2019 is the place to be for the latest in cybersecurity data, innovation, and thought leadership. March 4th through the 8th in San Francisco. Make sure you go there. Many of us will be there and speaking and or training. You can go to rsaconference.com/securityweekly-US19. You can register. The discount code that gets you $100 off is 5U9SWFD. That's 5 Utah Sierra Whiskey Foxtrot Delta.
I'm proud of you.
Get all that?
Did I
get that right?
No,
I
but
am
you missed
proud
the
of
nine.
You missed the
It's
nine.
Niner.
And it's uniform, not Utah.
It's uniform. All right, so hold on. 5 uniform.
One more.
Niner.
Fife, not five.
Sierra.
You got to say an F in the fife.
The what?
You say fife.
Fife?
Yep.
I know that's a 5.
You say five, uniform, Niner, Sierra, Whiskey, Foxtrot, Delta.
What Doug said.
Hoorah.
Thank you very much, Doug. $100 off of RSA. I want to introduce our guest for this first segment, for a technical segment. Vaughn has been an enterprise sales engineer with LogRhythm since 2015. He was formerly a customer. I think that speaks volumes about a company when customers go to work for the company. He's got 20 years of experience in information technology and is here today to talk about a strategy that really anyone can employ who's monitoring enterprise networks and use these tactics to detect attackers. Vaughn, welcome to the program.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being brave enough to join this episode, Vaughn, of Pulse Security Weekly. And I'm glad you're going to bring some normalcy and technical info to what, after this segment, is likely going to be a very, very crazy show. So, Vaughn, over to you.
Normalcy, I don't know, but maybe some technical info. I'll do what I can.
Awesome.
So yeah, thanks for having me. I really wanted to talk about a particular technique that I used as a customer that was important for me for identifying threats on my network. So, for those of us that are operating SIM, security analyst, you have something that runs on the network. You detect that's kind of weird, like maybe certain type of traffic that's suspicious or to be bad. It's difficult to trace it, to figure out what's the process that created that. Or vice versa, you have a process that runs on an endpoint. It's bad, but you want to find out what did it do. So I faced this as a customer, and there was a particular series of correlations that we did. It was pretty easy to do that allowed us to quickly identify what did this malware do on the network, or what piece of software caused this particular network activity.
Awesome. And so you're collecting logs from SystemOn on the actual systems, in addition to firewall logs, and correlating those together, correct?
Yeah, there's actually one additional piece to it. So you would collect logs from your network firewall, which is really common today. I was a LogRhythm customer, so I use Network Monitor. It gave me a bit more visibility into the metadata around the traffic. So I could see that it was, SMB version 1 with specific command strings. But the key piece that a lot of people, as a sales engineer, I've seen a lot of people don't do, and that's collect the connection monitoring information from Windows. And we'll talk about Linux a little bit towards the end. But if you enable connection monitoring on Windows, it allows you to correlate from a IP address that you see on the network into a specific process ID that's running on the endpoint. And if you're using something like SystemOn or Carbon Black or other type of EDR tool, you can extract the hash value out of that. So you can go from network activity to hash value of the process that caused it, and you can integrate that with a SOAR type response. So in my case, I would see what would be known malware, and I could use, like, for instance, the Carbon Black endpoint lockdown feature to isolate that host. I see malware, here's the executable, let me isolate it, let me blacklist it, that type of activity.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so for us, it was kind of important when we would see lateral movement, for instance, too, because having that network connection monitor piece in place, it doesn't necessarily, when you have lateral movement through past the hash, it doesn't traverse the firewall. It's all lateral. It doesn't typically leave the VLAN. So we were able to trace down, there's an executable that ran, and we pivot off of that to see this executable, what did it touch, and what are all the adjacent hosts that it touched. You can see it through the Windows.
In fact, when you said you could detect SMB v1, that was on the inside, right? That's not leaving the firewall going out to the internet. That was on the inside?
Oh, well, we can do that too. And that's through the network monitor piece that we have. So being a LogRhythm customer, I had this incorporated in my environment. So one of the differences between, like a next generation firewall and network monitor, they both do deep packet inspection and a classification, but the difference is the amount of metadata that's in there. So, like, for instance, a firewall, typically they're doing deep packet inspection for policies like permit or allow a certain type of traffic, where network monitor does a little bit deeper, where we're getting other types of metadata about it, like, okay, it was email, sender, this was the sender, this was the attachments, here's the string that was used, the hello protocol, those types of things. And we also did what we built into LogRhythm, the network monitor, is the ability to do packet capture, selective packet capture. I had that in my environment as well. So what we did, when we would see that we had an evil executable, what we called them, we had evil executable on our endpoints, we were able to pivot pretty quickly and say, okay, well, here's what it did. Here's everything from the network stream, including the metadata that was extracted. And we could pull down the PCAP as well. So we were using it to analyze command and control traffic. To be able to get that level of visibility was pretty useful. And I think a lot of people can do this using, if you don't have LogRhythm network monitor, you can do some of this stuff using firewall or intrusion detection or your web proxy. But the key piece really is to enable the Windows connection logs in your Windows system.
And so the Windows connection logs is what gives you the visibility into lateral movement, in addition to correlating that to external command and control that's leaving through your egress points to the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, we know that a particular endpoint was compromised, and as part of that response, okay, what did this endpoint touch? So when you do that pivot, you can see all the connections, and then you start to drill down into other hosts. Okay, well, what happened on this host?
Makes perfect sense. That's awesome. Did you have some slides and such to illustrate some of these attacks, Vaughn?
I did, yeah. I really wanted to illustrate the correlation piece and to give everybody kind of a some hints on how they can implement this in their organization.
Awesome.
Give me a moment to.
Oh, and you can go to securityweekly.com/LogRhythm. When you go there, the slides likely are already posted there on that page, so you can go there and access them.
Yeah, and I would say hit up that same site probably in about a month. It'll contain a link to a blog posting that we're going to have on this and more.
Awesome.
I didn't want to make this particularly slide heavy. I know that we have a lot of people that are listening to us via audio. We'll try to describe this in enough detail that it's useful for everybody. But the way that I thought about this conceptually was there were really kind of four pieces to it. There was the network detection piece, there was the host detection piece, the process detection piece, and block or do something about it. And there's different flavors of ways that you can implement this. This isn't the only way, but the key piece is the host detection or the host-based firewall. So we did not have host-based firewalls enabled in my organization. Like we didn't do blocking of certain ports using firewalls, but we did use the logging piece. And I put a command in here. You can use audit pol where you set a filtering platform connection to enable anything that was a success. I didn't really care about connections that failed. I really wanted to know what was open. And I put that command in here, and you can do it. You can push this out through GPO through your organization if you want to.
So, Vaughn, you weren't restricting any traffic in or out of your hosts, but you enabled the logging piece, so you had visibility into what connections were coming in or out of your systems.
That's exactly it. We were very strong on detective controls, and we didn't implement as many preventive controls just due to the nature of the organization.
Okay.
Don't shut down the business, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. We wanted the engineers to innovate, and if we're getting in their way, that's a problem. Yeah. So we relied on strong detection. On the network side, I mean, you could use firewalls. Next generation firewalls are pretty good. Proxy, IDS. In my particular case, I used the network monitor piece. But we're really correlating the IP addresses that are detected from the edge and the ports. So we're looking at source port, destination port, source IP, destination IP. And we're correlating that back to the host-based firewall, which has the IP addresses and the ports. But the key piece is it gives you the process ID. That's the piece that was important. We're identifying the process that created this particular traffic. And then off of the process ID, we're correlating it into the endpoint. I've used Carbon Black, but you can also do something similar with SystemOn, and talk a little bit about SystemOn. The concept is similar. We're correlating this process ID back into the endpoint to give us the hash. In the host-based firewalls, it logs the executable name, the full path to the executable name, but that doesn't really tell you a whole lot because we could just call an executable, whatever we want. I don't know about you guys, but when I write malware, I tend to call it chrome.exe or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, Larry, we've talked to a lot of pen testers, probably yourselves included. One of the ways you bypass detection is to rename PowerShell to something else, and then it runs and bypasses so much. It's like such a simple tactic.
Yeah, but the hash is important. The hash is a little harder to hide from. There's some ways to do it. And there was an excellent session that, on your show a couple months ago. It was Carlos was talking about with Brian from LogRhythm. We're talking about evasion techniques for SystemOn. It was a fantastic session. So I'd encourage everybody to go back and take a look at that one. But out of the box, SystemOn does some pretty good things for you to give you a hash if you're okay with some of it. Or you can use commercial tools like Carbon Black. Carbon Black works both on Windows and Linux. That's how I did it in my organization. I used Carbon Black. I'm looking at other ones that would do something similar.
So, Vaughn, does Windows natively with SystemOn give you the hash of the process that's running?
Yeah, it's SystemOn does it.
Okay.
The Windows SystemOn tool, you enable, there's a command. I didn't include the commands to set up that, but it's
Sure,
like SystemOn 64-C-H or something like that, and you give it the hash value that you want.
Awesome.
The hash algorithm. And you would collect it into your SIM like you would any other log source.
Sweet.
So you can chain this together. And I have a couple samples of what that looks like. But when you get this all together, you can do something about it too. So it could be like using Carbon Black Respond to isolate the host, or if you have an application whitelisting tool, you can do an automatic blacklist. So if you're seeing something bad on the network, you can very automatically trace it down to the hash value, automatically block it, or even do something simple like just shut off the network port of the device to do an isolation.
Cool.
I put together just an example of what the logs coming at our network monitor look like. The important piece is that we're extracting the source IP, the destination IP, the ports involved. Network monitor, we do the deep packet inspection. We know that it's torrent. You can use other types of analytics tools, so it could be things like on a threat list, or maybe it's certain things that match certain type of metadata criteria. Like WannaCry is a very simple example. SMB version 1 that has a specific command string in it, and the path has a hard-coded value that looks a certain way, and you can flag that as an indicator, and you can use that to very quickly trace back to what was the executable that caused this, Chrome exe or PowerShell or something.
Well, it's such a simple correlation, right? Like what binaries are running versus what ports are they connecting to on the internet. It's so simple. You wonder why more people aren't just looking at this as one of their indicators, in their SOC.
Because it's all about ML and AI.
Well, what?
It's
Is that a new rap song you just
no, ML and
invented?
AI. It's all about, you got to do machine learning, you got to do
gotta say
artificial
it in
intelligence, and we don't even do the basics when it comes to just basic correlations, right? We see traffic, we see a process running.
It's really hard to take you seriously when you're in a Santa outfit.
Oh, wait until the next segment.
Because what you're saying is sound, and I'm looking at you, and you just have the Santa. What is the wig? Can you put? What is the glasses right there?
No, I got to put.
Oh, that's
they're
right.
so
Okay.
hot. Well, next segment. Don't worry.
Okay.
And
Sorry.
he's going to catch his beard on fire with a cigar.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sorry, Vaughn. Continue.
Oh, this is fun. This is all good stuff. You're right. When I became an SC and I started talking to others in the industry in a way that I really didn't before, I was kind of surprised. Why doesn't everybody have this enabled? So I've been trying to talk to people and get the message out that this is a tool that's available to people. If they choose to use it, that they can, enable the connection logs to be able to perform what is really a simple correlation. It's certainly if you have a server that in your organization that has the keys to the kingdom, maybe you want a little bit better visibility into an enabling connection monitoring would be the way to go. But it's all about getting that hash value, because the hash value uniquely identifies that executable. Rather than, in this case, I didn't do anything funny with the name. This was a microtorrent exe. But being able to use the hash value, we're uniquely identifying that executable, hash collisions aside. And then it puts us in a better position to do something about it. We know exactly what ran. We have the PCAP. We can extract that out of the executables. Just a simple correlation.
And a simple correlation could be simply do a reversing labs lookup for, there's different ways to do these correlations, right? Yeah, you have the process ID, but there's other sources potentially that helps you, I think, right, with being able to correlate what's actually happening on the endpoint that gives you a little more clarity to says, oh yeah, that's malicious. We should definitely block that.
Well, it's a staged approach, right? It's this hash potentially malicious. Oh, this IP address or domain it's connecting to potentially
is malicious,
right? This port, so it helps you kind of elevate the score of that event. So some analysts along the lines see that as their number one or in the top 10 they're looking at that day. Yeah.
In our particular case, we ran this kind of both ways. We would see on the endpoint there were certain indicators. One indicator was there was a specific version of 7-zip with a specific signature. We never ran 7-zip. It was really an indicator. like 100%, it was an indication of the adversaries that we were facing. And we would see that, and we would identify the process IDs and just run it up the chain. What did this set of executables do? In some cases, we would see IP addresses to certain network providers in certain regions of the world. Okay, it's that network provider again. What created it? And we would just work backwards on the chain. You're right. It's something pretty simple. I'm just trying to get the word out there in case it helps people. I've looked at doing the same thing for Linux. I've only been able to do it with Carbon Black. If anybody's got tips on how to generate hash values on Linux systems using open source or built-in Linux tools, shoot me an email, send me a note. Would love to hear about that. As far as the freely available software, I've only been able to do it on Windows with SystemOn, but on the Linux systems, you can do this with Carbon Black pretty easily. And I suspect there's other EDR tools out there that you could do this with. Just I haven't run into the other ones so much yet. Also wanted to give another tip to people. We talked about Network Monitor. Network Monitor is available for free. It's a freemium version, not time-limited version of the software. So if you wanted to, particularly those that have labs at home, or you run into in your organization, you have a pinch and you need something like deep packet inspection, the metadata extraction as a standalone, you can download the free version at LogRhythm.com/netmon. It is not time-limited. There are some limitations in terms of bandwidth. It allows you to go up to a gig. You can store a limited amount of packet captures, but if you need run into a security incident, and we've all been there, basically any tool that can help us get through it would probably be appreciated by others. So I wanted to spread the word that this is available as a tool in addition to the correlation that might help people. We have Netmon available. Feel free to download it, try it out, use it. Hopefully it helps.
Yeah, I feel like people try to tie together too many solutions or get too complex. And what I like about Vaughn's solution is it's very simple, right? You're basing it on a hash value, on a process that's running, and maybe correlating that with threat intelligence that the IP or domain. If those two things match, that's an incident you need to go do incident response on. And I love that, Vaughn, because it's so simple, right? I think we try and complicate the problems way too much, and it's the simplest solutions that are often the most effective and the easiest to create processes to respond to.
One case, you talked about threat list. We would run into cases where something got triggered on a threat list, and you have to trace back. Well, what caused this to fire? Oh, okay, it was Chrome. All right, somebody went to an ad that happened to be on a threat list, and you kind of discount those. So it makes it a little easier to qualify the threats, being able to get that end-to-end visibility. And you're right, it's pretty easy.
And I assume you're doing the correlation in your SIM, right? So you're pulling the logs, doing the correlation there, and then just flagging those as higher level incidents for the SOC analyst to actually take a look at, right? I mean, that's where the correlation is actually coming together, is in the SIM itself.
Yeah, you're right. So I presented this as kind of you can do this via search, or you can do this via memory-based analytics. As we started to improve on our processes, we did use analytics rules to automatically perform this correlation for us. We have an in-memory-based correlation, so it happens on the fly. And we would use that to eliminate false positives, like that threat list case where there was a threat list, but it was Chrome. We're not really going to chase that. Or there was a connection on a threat list and it was Outlook EXE. Yeah, we probably want to look at that one a little closer.
April?
What about in terms of fileless malware?
We did run into those. In the case with fileless malware, that one did get a little trickier. It would, if I recall, the process ID would come down to like the interpreter, like the PowerShell interpreter, Explorer EXE, and that one required a little bit more digging using the EDR. So the fileless malware, we had Angler. I believe Angler was in-memory based malware, if I recall. An Angler, one of the other ones. There's so many we faced. We actually just dug into it via Carbon Black, but being able to track that down into this was the process ID of Explorer that ran it. As you start to interrogate it, you can see some of the command line arguments, or in Carbon Black, you can see some of the things with DLL loading and those types of things. It when you have hundreds of millions of logs coming in a day, being able to get down to the process ID and the specific event that that caused it is a good chunk of the work, and then from there it's just interrogating, what happened with this process, what happened with the system, what else went on.
Awesome. Vaughn, thank you so much. You can find out more by visiting securityweekly.com/LogRhythm. Vaughn's slides will be available there, and further materials if you check back on that site. Vaughn, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. With that, we're going to get a short break. Come back and talk about what the heck are security basics. Stay tuned.